Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul sing Your praise unending, 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship Your holy name. Lord, I worship Your holy name.
Now don't leave me alone. I'm my faithful shepherd. Guide me, dear Master, and be unto me a helper. I am alone without You, nothing at all. I am alone without You, nothing at all. So take my right hand, oh Lord, and guide me in Your way forever. So take my right hand, oh Lord, and guide me in Your way forever. And don't leave me alone in the midst of this darkness. Let Your bright face guide me, O Lord, unto peace. I am alone without You, nothing at all. I am alone without You, nothing at all. So take my right hand, oh Lord, and guide me in Your way forever. So take my right hand, oh Lord, and guide me in Your way forever. And don't leave me alone because of my sins, but forgive me, O Lord, and accept my repentance. I am alone without You, nothing at all. I am alone without You, nothing at all. So take my right hand, oh Lord, and guide me in Your way forever.
So take my right hand,
O Lord, and guide me
in your way forever.
In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for all your love. Please, Lord, we know that you love us and we love you, but please let us feel your love in our life. Do not ever let the devil to steal your love from our hearts and letting us to feel that we are rejected. We are with no Father. Thank you, Lord, for letting us to come into your house. Thanks for your holy body and your precious blood. Thanks for the service. Thanks for the servants. Thanks for everything that you gave us in our life. Please, Lord, teach us how to love you more and more, how to get closer to you, how to feel your presence in your life, how to talk to you, how to have a spiritual ears that we can listen to you. Through the intercession of Saint Mary, Archangel Michael, Saint Bishoy, Saint Wannes, Saint Stephen, and all the other saints, make us all worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come.
This is our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, and his kingdom and power and glory.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. How are we? I need responses. How is everyone? Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All good. Good to see some familiar faces and some not so familiar faces. Alrighty. Tonight, everyone, it is an interesting topic. Okay. I actually have no idea what tonight's about, and I love that. Learning something completely new. Not sure if you guys are familiar with it either, poetry and Christianity, but I'm sure if you haven't, there's some really good stuff to cover tonight. Now, we only told you that it was John Mitry that is presenting tonight's talk, but in fact, it is actually John and Sam, so there's double the excitement there. I think we did that last time as well. We told you it was only Sam, but it was also John. So that's what we're doing now. These two. Okay, we got Rose as well. All right, just one last thing as well. So we have some handouts. Okay. So, tonight's talk involves a lot of material that you have to follow with. And we printed 10 of each, so we might just spread it around, and maybe if we go into groups, that way everyone can benefit. It will also be on the screen, but because it's like small printing, you might want to follow on the handouts as well, okay? But I think before the talk, I think Rose has something small she wants to share, so come along.
So it's not that I wanted to share. I was telling Mario, like, if we're running late, I had a miracle happen to me today. He's like, 100%, even if we're not running late, you're sharing this miracle. And then I came to tell him, he was like, no, save it. So now I have to say it. So I don't know if you guys know, but I have a little dog named Snickers. It's about this big. And he's a mini foxy. And I went away for a little while, and by the time I came back, my parents took care of him, and they literally made him so fat that he is like a sausage dog now. Like, he literally has rolls on rolls. Anyway, so the vet's like, great, you're almost going to kill your dog. You have to walk him or he's going to die. I was like, okay. So we're at the point past of like normal health. We actually have to take steps. So I was like, all right, okay, I have to walk my dog. And so I took just the essentials, my dog, my phone, and a set of keys that belonged to my house and this other house, like 2 houses. So this little set of keys and it had like a little Jesus on it, like a cross. So I was just like walking along. By the way, for those of you who don't know, I actually live in Mount Druitt. So it's not the best of areas, but it's like, yeah, it's not Emerton, but it's not like the hills. Like it's somewhere in between. Anyway, so I'm walking my dog, I'm having a good old time. And then we walk for a long time. I would say about an hour. So I'm walking for like an hour with my dog. And then he starts getting really unwell. Actually, I have a voice recording of what he sounds like when he got unwell. I'll just play it. Wait. Yeah. I don't know if you could tell, but that's not how dogs are supposed to sound. Anyway, so I started panicking. I was like, oh my gosh, my dog is going to die and I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I sat him down and we're about an hour away from home. So I have an hour back to walk, right? Because I thought he's fat, we need to walk for a long time. So yeah, I was like, okay, what do I do? And so I sit down on the side of the road and then I realized that I've lost my keys. I have no idea. I cannot even, I don't remember the point in time where my keys were gone. There, literally no memory. I was like, okay, at what point in time do I remember having my keys and at what point in time do I remember losing them? Couldn't remember, legit. It was just mindfulness was not there. I was not mindful at all and I was just walking. I was like, okay, so I'm an hour away from home. My dog is sounding dreadful. What do I do? So I was like, okay, I'm going to walk back. I'm going to start walking home and I'm going to carry him. Remember how I said, my parents made him so fat that he changed his breed? Yeah, he's heavy. He was so heavy to carry back home. So I'm walking. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. So I walked, along the road of where, I retraced my steps pretty much. And then I was thinking, where are these keys? How am I going to get back into the house? Once I get into the house, I need to tend to this dog. I have to give him water, whatever. So I start praying. I'm like, please, Jesus, don't let my dog die in my arms. Please, Jesus, help me find my keys. I was like, okay. And then he starts sounding worse, so I completely forget prayer. It just goes out of my head, and I'm now, focusing on Snickers. So after I'm sitting with Snickers for a little bit, I put him down, he calms a little bit down, I start walking back. And it's been an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from the point I remembered that I lost my keys to the point of where I am now. So I'm like, okay, Jesus, I want to pray one last time. Help me right now. I don't even know what I'm going to do. Help me. And I promise you, I'm in front of the church, hand to God. I look and there are my keys in the middle of nowhere. They're just on the path, perfectly placed in the middle. I cannot explain it to you because I was walking down that same path 5 minutes ago. And I was like, okay, so thank you. It's a bit scary, but thank you. And I just when you kind of see these things happen to other people and you're like, oh yeah. But I was just walking and I was like, that's my keys. What do you mean? And they were on the middle of the concrete pathway. Anyone could have picked them up. It was 2 hours after. And I don't remember them falling. I would have heard them hit concrete. They're metal. They're a big bunch of keys. I did not hear them fall. So yeah, in my last prayer, I was like, last hour, please help me right now. I just see them there. I was like, okay, there was a miracle today. I have to tell people because we need to reissue the vibrance of faith. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Yeah, he's better now. I went home, I gave him cold water, and he feels 110, but he's not sounding like that. He still needs. So where Luxford Road meets Carla Avenue. Yeah, it's a very popular road. I don't know how that happened. Oh, yes, sorry, I have to invite our guests. Sorry, I completely forgot about that. Can we please have John, Mitry, and Sam come up to the front? Yay! Everyone say congratulations to John. He got married. Yay! Oh, you said that last time. Chef McConch's hands.
Do you want to address it? Oh, no. So, hello. How are we? So one change to the schedule. It's just me. I apologize. It was supposed to. Yeah, no. I apologize. Due to my poor planning, Sam and I were trying to get something together. We decided to take it in a different direction, and so here we are. Now, the aim is to talk about poetry and Christianity, and while I wouldn't consider myself like well read enough or like able to talk about it, it's something that I love intensely, and so because of that, I'll stand here and talk a bit about it. And whenever you want me to shut up, by all means, just say so. Okay, so you should have two handouts. I think I could be wrong. I think my computer is about to die, but you've got a charger? Yeah. Actually, do you mind if I? Yeah. Sweet. Okay. Because there are one or two poems where we could read them. It's much better if the author reads them. So it's worthwhile. But let's just start, and we'll see how we go. And at any time, just stop me and if you have questions or thoughts or things you want to go through, let me know. Now, maybe just to start off, how many people here regularly read poetry? 1, 2. Okay. How many people not so regularly read poetry? How many people have read poetry? Okay, there's more. Yeah. Okay, let's do it without school first. Okay, let's do it with school. The funny thing is there's at least 1 or 2 people who haven't put their hands up. It's even at school when you were told to read poetry, no, thank you, but no. Thanks, dude. Okay, so it's worthwhile saying I sort of really didn't like English when I was in school. I think it's because I've just got a very jealous mindset that as soon as someone tells me to do something, I really want to rebel. Not that I do it particularly well, but it's just a sort of, I don't know, it's a stupid thing. And so I think while I was at school, I didn't take the opportunity to enjoy reading and poetry and all the rest, as I think I should have. And as soon as no one was telling me to do it, I found it much more enjoyable. Does anyone else have that same sort of experience, that while they're at school, told to do something? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I'm not alone there. All right. So I thought what we could start off with is reading from a poet and a best-selling author on poetry about how to read poetry. It doesn't make sense to listen to a guy who's just enjoys it about how to read poetry. So we'll go through a bit of an essay by Edward Hirsch. So a guy from America. I've tried to write. So we're going sort of through the one that starts like that. Okay. And if you go to the second page, at the top, how to read a poem. Just underneath it, Edward Hirsch, the guy who wrote it. And I've tried to write, whenever I can, a little description about whoever's writing it is. So this guy is a contemporary American poet, wrote a national bestseller about reading poetry called How to Read a Poem and Fall in Love with Poetry. So he seems like a half-decent resource. And at a few spots along the way, we'll just stop and read a poem, see if it resonates. And if it doesn't, we're only here for an hour, so it's okay. Okay, cool. Now, it's worthwhile asking up front, do you want me to just read through it, or do people here have a desire to read alongside with me or instead of me? I know how many people like volunteering to read. Yeah, we've got a few. All right. Forgive me for reading, and I'll see if we can take us through it. So, Edward Hirsch. Reading poetry well is part attitude and part technique. Curiosity is a useful attitude, especially when it's free of preconceived ideas about what poetry is or should be. Effective technique directs your curiosity into asking questions, drawing you into a conversation with the poem. The goal of careful reading is often to take up a question of meaning, an interpretive question that has more than one answer. Since the form of a poem is part of its meaning, for example, features such as repetition and rhyme may amplify or extend the meaning of a word or idea, adding emphasis, texture, or dimension. Questions about form and technique, about the observable features of a poem, provide an effective point of entry for interpretation. Okay? So he's giving a sense saying the structure of a poem is useful to trying to understand a poem. Now, I'll give you one of my favorite poems by John Donne, Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God. So that's the first poem on the other sheet. So if you want to go through that. Yeah. Oh. All right. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but that's the poem just there. Okay. And this guy's not alive, so we're not going to be able to get his reading of it, but, we'll make do. Okay, so John Donne was a writer, poet, clergyman. I'm sorry, I probably should have put, circa whenever he was alive. But, yeah, forgive me, I think, 1800s-ish, but don't quote me. Okay. So this poem is called Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand, overthrow me and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like a usurped town to another Jew, labour to admit you, but owe to no end. Reason your viceroy in me should defend, but is captive and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but am betrothed unto your enemy. Divorce me, untie me, or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, shall never be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. Okay. Now, one question that's always a good question to ask right after you read a poem. Does anyone get what's going on with that poem? No, I mean, we could all just say yes and we move on, but does anyone find any part of that less than completely obvious? It takes a bit of courage to say yes, I understand. Anyone? Thoughts? Yes? No? Right, yeah. And that's kind of the whole sort of thing with poetry. You would be amazing if you got a poem on its first reading. I'm pretty sure I read this 50 times before I was like, he's talking about, Yeah, it takes a few readings, right? So maybe that's the first thing. It's okay to not get everything about a poem on its first reading, okay? Bit of humility, bit of courage to say, I'm not getting everything is absolutely good. But was there anything that you did pick up, anything that you did like, anything that struck you in a nice way? Or in a not so nice way, just struck you at all? Anything? Yeah? Oh.
He says he's betrothed to his enemy.
Right.
So who's the enemy? Is it Satan or is it someone else?
Right. So that, maybe it's a good question to ask. Who's speaking and to who is the person speaking? So this is John Donne writing the poem, so we'll assume it's John Donne speaking. That first line, who's he speaking to? Yeah, God, right? How do you know it's God? And what makes you, the word God. What else do you know about, who he's speaking to then? Yeah, that's a weird way of saying it, three-personed God, an obvious reference to the Trinity, right? Okay, so you do get, bits and pieces of it. This is, you're walking along, picking bits and pieces up. Okay. A little bit lower, he's saying, I labor to admit you. He's speaking to God saying, I'm struggling to have you come inside, right? It's not quite working the way it should. And so he's saying, I am betrothed unto your enemy. So who would be the caricature of it, but who's the enemy of God? Yeah, Satan, the devil. Yeah, some, evil sort of thing. Saying, I feel like I'm closer linked to Satan than I am to you. Obviously, he's not thrilled about the situation, right? But he's sort of trying to be as honest as he can be, which is, a big thing with poetry, right? But yeah, okay, so does that make a bit more sense? Are there any other bits and pieces that struck people that people wanted to make a point of?
Hi. I really enjoyed the last two lines because, especially the one that's except you enthrall me, I shall never be free, because I feel like it really speaks to that idea of we want freedom from a whole lot of things, but the only way that we can really be free is to be still in the grasp of God, kind of.
Yeah.
And the one after it, the only way you can ever be chased is if he ravishes you, kind of like that. I like that contrast there. And
Yeah. It's a very sort of counterintuitive thing where, to be enthralled by something is to be captured by it. And yet he's saying the only way that I could be free is to be captured by you. The only way that I could be, and yeah, this is the last line is the most provocative line, right? Because it's sexually charged. It's, I will never be chaste. I will never be pure. I will never be virginal except you ravish me, right? Like a complete sort of overturning of what we would usually expect there, right? All right, any other bits and pieces that you liked or didn't like or want to go through? No? Okay, one, for me, so I tried to color code bits and pieces, and this is the only poem I've done it for, so I don't know if you can see, but you've got batter my heart, three-person God, for you as yet, and so he's saying to God, batter against my heart. What image is he playing off of? You don't have the image here. It's from Revelations. Yeah, Jesus stands and knocks at the door, right? Revelations 3. So he's saying, you're at my heart knocking. He's saying, don't knock. Break the door down. Be a bit more, violent with me, because I need that, right? So batter my heart, three-person God. And he's saying, so far, this is what you do. You knock. It's a nice gentle action. You breathe, shine, seek to mend. He's saying, those are all very nice, but it's not enough. So what does he ask? That I may rise and stand. He's saying, overthrow me and bend your force to break, not knock, blow, not breathe, burn, not shine, and make me new, don't just mend me. Right? There's an amplification of what he wants God to do. He's saying, don't do the gentle thing. Gentle doesn't work with me. I need you to kick down the door, come in, that sort of a thing. Do you see that sort of amplification? Okay, cool. Yeah, that took me 20 reads. But yeah, it takes a bit of reading. But this is the sort of thing that I love about poetry. You can't aggressively go at a poem. You kind of just have to read it over and over and over again. And there's a certain part, or maybe a certain time at which it sort of starts to blossom a bit more for you. Okay, read John Donne, great guy. Yeah, he's also a priest. We have a priest in there. Okay. Actually, yeah, has your dad ever written poetry or anything like that? Get him to A. Yeah. Father, write some poetry for us. All right, awesome. Okay, so at the very least, you can start to see, so from something like that first poem, that structure of a repeat but an amplification of certain words, you start to take away a sense of what is being sort of gotten at with the poem, right? That structure informs the meaning. Okay, so Edward Hirsch goes on to talk about how to get started when we're reading a poem. So some prior assumptions. So, most readers make 3 false assumptions when addressing an unfamiliar poem. The first is assuming that they should understand what they encounter on the first reading, and if they don't, that something is wrong with them or with the poem, right? So it takes a few readings. It's something that we don't have to get the first time, we don't have to get the 50th time, right? If it takes 51 times, so be it. If it takes 1,000,001 times, so be it, right? Okay. The second is assuming that the poem is a kind of code, that each detail corresponds to one and only one thing, and unless they can crack this code, they've missed the point. Yeah, there's a playfulness, right? Like not everything is just like a one-to-one correspondence. A bijection for anyone who studies maths, but you know. Okay, and the third bad assumption is assuming that a poem can mean anything readers want it to mean. Have you heard that story? I believe it's true, but you know, maybe I'm just like hoping. Have you heard that story about the HSC interpretation of a particular passage? Particular teacher is sort of saying the guy was using blue because he was particularly depressed, and that's what he wants to try and get across by using this blue colored door. And then they go on this trip and they meet the author, and they teacher very excitedly, the blue door, we all picked up that was your depression. And he's like, I didn't, no, it was just a blue door, right? And like there's at the very least, like on one level, it's a nice little anecdote about the miscommunication between what is intended and what is picked up in terms of a piece of writing. But there do seem to be sort of two poles. One being a poem doesn't have its own meaning. I can make it mean whatever I want it to mean. I can just read it in any particular way and I can decide what it means. Versus there's one meaning that's the only sort of meaning that's like permissible, and I have to sort of crack this code to understand this, and if I understand anything else, I've done bad. I've mistakenly read the poem. Whereas there seems to be more of a middle ground, which is, no, there are multiple good readings of a poem, but there are bad readings. You can misread a poem, right? So something in between, that's what he's getting at. Okay, does that make sense? Does anyone want to argue that point? Like, does anyone want to punch on over that? No? Okay, yeah, cool. All right. It's good to check.
Wait, can I ask just like, I think it might be a point worth making, but is there not, like, I'm tempted to say that that's bad writing. Like, if you have to read something 5 times to get it, shouldn't they just say what they mean? Like, is there a point to making things so...
Yeah, like ambiguous? Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, because it's a type of reading that requires a certain effort and input from the reader that is not the same as many other genres that we're used to. For example, I mean, like, if you take a step back and you think through, if I give you a scientific textbook and I give you a poem, should you read those two things in the same way? Okay, some people said no. Why not? Right, there seems to be a different purpose with both of those, right? And yeah, like if we're talking about something like a scientific textbook and it's supposed to inform, yeah, like lack of ambiguity, we want to get to the point as quickly and as like succinctly as possible with as much accuracy as is appropriate for any level, right? Whereas poetry, not doing the same sort of a thing, right? We'll see a little bit later on when poets talk about what they think poetry is supposed to do, but very rarely is it just information. And so, yeah, the different purpose.
Hello? Yep, okay. So, like, I did miss the first part of the talk, so I do apologize
if
this is already brought up. But does it matter if the author intended one thing, like, and you read it into another? Like, if you ultimately, like, why does it matter that the author's interpretation, or like the author's intention of how it was meant to be read has to be played on into the poem? Like, why can't that be, I suppose, like, adapted to the person's own, like, experiences, etc.?
Yeah, no, that's fair. So, like, I mean, there are those who would argue, like, both sides. So you do find people who are saying whatever the author sort of was thinking about, that's the thing that you're supposed to get out of the poem. But I think we'll see later on, there does seem to be this sense of creativity and conversation within the space of a poem, so that even the things that the poet was thinking don't sort of define the meaning of the poem, and you find poets advocating that particular point. So that I think like it's very okay to say, just because the poet was or wasn't thinking it, that doesn't determine then what the poem does or doesn't mean. We'll see that when we go through some things by Scott Cairns, where he makes that point. Yeah, but it's great question. Great question.
Completely different.
Yeah.
I was just saying, does that concept apply to the Bible and the different books of the Bible which were written for different purposes, different audiences? Would you, if you were to take something different from a book, like some people would say that's really good, like you're thinking about it differently to someone else. Like some books were made to inform you about like Jesus' life or whatnot. Others were made to, get to know Jesus on an emotional level.
Right. Yeah. So fascinating question. I do think that there's a very real sense in which that sort of a reading is required reading when you're like approaching scripture. There's a nice guy, David Bentley Hart. He makes this point rather strongly. He goes, I don't know what was in Isaiah's head when he was writing his prophecies. I've got no sense of that. And so for me to try to recreate his thoughts, I mean, how do I do that? And yet we don't throw out a very old book because we can't sort of psychologically get into someone's head. I do think there's a lot of benefit to trying to say it's not simply reproducing the poet's or author's thoughts. It's something a little bit more broad than that. But he, like in that particular talk, when he's talking, he goes on to sort of talk about the boundaries within which good interpretation occur. So there are ways you can go too far, and there are ways that, no, you can sort of expand a bit further. I think we get to that a little bit later, but yeah, like let me know if I don't touch on it. All right, cool. We good? Okay, awesome. So let's continue on for a bit. William Carlos Williams, wonderful name, wrote a verse addressed to his wife in the poem January Morning. All this was for you, old woman. I wanted to write a poem that you would understand. For what good is it to me if you can't understand it, but you got to try hard? William admits in these lines that poetry is often difficult. He also suggests that a poet depends on the effort of a reader. Somehow a reader must complete what the poet has begun, right? So it's not simply that reproducing the thoughts of the author, it's contending with, entering into a conversation with. This act of completion begins when you enter the imaginative play of a poem, bringing to it your own experience and point of view. If a poem is play in the sense of a game or a sport, then you enjoy that it makes you work a little, that it makes you sweat a bit. Reading poetry is a challenge, but like so many other things, it takes practice, and your skills and insight improve as you progress, right? So that contention, that fact that you have to work a bit to get at the poetry, I mean, there's a reason why we like tennis and soccer and all of these things when they're not easy, right? Like we don't just want something easy in every aspect of our life. Maybe very often we have, or we may have sort of thought that we wanted it here, maybe sort of leave it for a bit, allow the sort of school influence to subside, and then return to it. Okay. Literature is and has always been the sharing of experience, the pooling of human understanding about living, loving, and dying. Successful poems welcome you in, revealing ideas that may not have been foremost in the writer's mind in the moment of composition. So this is what we were saying before, right? The best poetry has a magical quality, a sense of being more than the sum of its parts. And even when it's impossible to articulate this sense, this something more, the power of the poem is left undiminished. right? Because you're drawn into a poem and you're not a passive component of trying to read poetry, like you actively have to engage, you help make meaning. And if you help make meaning, then it's not just whatever the poem sort of laid down that you pick up, but it's the conversation between you that can spark new thoughts that weren't necessarily just in the head of the author, right? Okay. Poems speak to us in many ways. Though their forms may not always be direct or narrative, keep in mind that a real person formed the moment of the poem, and it's wise to seek an understanding of that moment. Sometimes the job of the poem is to come closer to saying what cannot be said in other forms of writing, to suggest an experience, idea, or feeling that you can know but not entirely express in any direct or literal way. The techniques of word and line arrangement, sound and rhythm add to, and in some cases multiply, the meanings of words to go beyond the literal, giving you an impression of an idea or feeling, an experience that you can't quite put into words, but that you know is real. So let me read one poem. It's called Do Not Touch Me by Timothy Jeffries Johnson, Orthodox poet. Don't know the guy, but I like him. Okay, so page 3 of the, or like number 3 in the poems. Put it on the screen? Yeah. Sorry, my mistake, not number 3. Number 6. Yeah, sorry, number 6. Thank you. No? Okay. So I'll read it off this so I can go along. Okay, so the poem's called Do Not Touch Me. Timothy Jeffries Johnson, Orthodox poet. It is not you. You were never so clear, though I never so dull, so spent. It is not you here where you cannot be. The hair isn't right, the clothes, the incomprehensible, inexcusable radiance. At this moment of all moments, you have already left. Where leaving was not foreseen, you have left me lost. It is not you who mocks grief and takes my best, my only consolation. The stance is different, the words impossible. So much like your words, your voice, that voice which cut my heart, but it cannot be you. 7 foes have feared you, only I remain, who know nothing but love, and would love you, will love you, if it were only you. But it cannot. It can. Trails off, right? I always struggle with that last part. It's like, can. You sound like an idiot. Oh, can't. Sorry. Okay. Thoughts, sense, what's going on, what's not going on, what strikes you as interesting, cool, what's going on there? Yeah, right, that.
It's almost as if he created it like that or wrote it like that so we can read it in a specific way.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the lines I'm like, okay, I don't know why he's starting a new line and saying a new thing.
Right.
Or saying something that's, carrying on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
Right, yeah. Like the end of the line, so the fact that, so it is not you, new line, you were never so clear, new line, like wherever they've chosen to put a new line makes you read it or not read it in particular ways, and that affects the meaning. Yeah, that's a really, really good thing to pick up. All right, anything else? Does anyone know what's going on in the poem? Right, yeah. So who's the voice and who's it speaking about? Does anyone have any sense whatsoever? Yeah, we have... Beth, you know? Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Anyone else? Hint? 7 foes. That's the thing that gives it away to me. Do not touch me. Okay, I'll give you a hint. Gospels. John's Gospel. End of John's Gospel. Yeah, no? Not Jesus talking. He's being spoken to. Yeah, exactly. It's Mary Magdalene, right? Yeah. Okay, with that information, like it's the resurrectional appearance, John 20 something ish like that. Mary is sort of like they've taken away the body of the Lord. She looks over. She thinks that there's the gardener here. She speaks to the gardener. Where have they taken away my Lord? Like, my Lord, let me know. I'll come and take the body away. And he sort of turns and reveals himself as Jesus. Okay, that's the episode. Now read the poem again, knowing that none of that was said. Okay? It is not you who are never so clear, though I never so dull, so spent. Why? Because the crucifixion has just happened. She's been crying her eyes out all weekend, right? Along with the entire Christian church, right? It is not you here where you cannot be. Why? Because you died, right? The hair isn't right, the clothes, the incomprehensible, and I love this, inexcusable radiance. How dare you shine, right? Inexcusable radiance. At this moment of all moments, like you're shining, my Lord just died. Like, there's almost this, like, have some respect, right? You have already left. Where leaving was not foreseen. Who would have seen the crucifixion before, despite the fact that he said it a few times? You have left me lost. It is not you who mocks grief and takes away my best, my only consolation. Why are you weeping? Next to a tomb, like, what, you don't know? Right? Who takes my best, my only consolation? The body of the one that I love. Right? The stance is different, the word's impossible, so much like your words, the voice which cut my heart, but it cannot be you. 7 foes have feared you, because Saint Mary was the one out of whom 7 demons had been cast, right? Only I remain, who know nothing but love and would love you, will love you, if it were you, but it cannot. And there's this sense in which she stops speaking because I think she's starting to get it, right? Yeah, which is why it cuts off. Gorgeous poem, absolutely gorgeous poem. Like, read that on, like, resurrection night or, like, on Easter morning, right? Like that, as if that wouldn't sort of invigorate you about the resurrection. But, you know. But, I mean, one of the beautiful things there is exactly what you were mentioning, where the lines stop and how they make you think or not think of certain ideas, right? I'll see if I can, like, pick an example. Yeah, like, even you have already left and you, like, sort of take that moment, like you take that in, and then you move on to the next line, where leaving was not foreseen, despite the fact that it's still that same point. It's that every sentence, every idea is given its time because it's all put on different lines. Take this, deal with it. And take the next line, deal with it. Like, it slows you down just by the structure of the poem, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right. It's good to know I'm not speaking absolute rubbish. Okay. We're doing for time. Okay, cool. Okay, I'm going to maybe skip ahead because I don't want to keep you for too long. I think it's worthwhile not labouring the point too much. I don't want to be like school where we sort of killed it. Is it possible at all to get the what if poem, like that link? Let me... Oh, actually, yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I think I should be.
I wrote this poem which is called
All right.
What If?
Sorry. Just to say, so this guy, Malcolm Guy, absolutely in love with him. So the poem, if you're wanting to read along, is 7? Yeah, it is 7. Okay. Yeah, singer, songwriter. He's in a rock band. He's a priest, pipe smoker, like the embodiment of like Tolkien, short, stubby. Like I wore a vest on my wedding day because I saw him wearing a vest and he's got the same shape as me. I'm deeply in love with this guy. Okay, but playing this because it's worth being able to hear how a poem should sound, and some poems, the way that they're read is everything. So just try and pay attention.
In which I just reflected for a moment on perhaps the least quoted saying of Jesus. And the least quoted saying, I think, but the one which ought to be inscribed in golden letters above the door of every politician's office and in diamond letters above the door of every advertising agency is, as you will have now guessed, Matthew 12, 36 and 37, you remember, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words shalt thou be justified, and by thy words shalt thou be condemned. What if every word we say never ends or fades away, gathers volume, gathers way, drums and dims us with dismay, surges on some dreadful day when we cannot get away, whelms us till we drown? What if not a word is lost? What if every word we cast, cruel, cunning, cold, accursed, every word we cut and paste echoes to us from the past, fares and finds us first and last, haunts and hunts us down? What if every murmuration, every otiose oration, every blogger's obfuscation, every tweeted titivation, every oath and imprecation, insidious insinuation, every verbal aberration, unexamined asseveration, idiotic iteration, every facile explanation drags us to the ground? What if each polite evasion, every word of defamation, insults made by implication, querulous prevarication, compromising convocation, propaganda for the nation, false or flattering persuasion, blackmail and manipulation, simulated desperation, grows to such reverberation that it shakes our own foundation, shakes and brings us down? Better that some words be lost. Better that they should not last, tongues of fire and violence. O word, through whom the world is blessed, word, in whom all words are graced, do not bring us to the test. Give our clement voices rest, and the rest is silence.
All right. What'd you think of that? Yeah, right? So, like, do people know, like, when you're like, all right, okay. Yeah, massive fan of Malcolm Guy, massive. Okay, so what struck you about that? What did you like? What did you get? What piqued your interest? Anything? Or did you hate it? Don't say that. That's not nice. Yeah, right. Yeah, like I had to, like when I was reading this, I had to like read it with a dictionary. Yeah, like to pick up half the words. Yeah. Yeah, very intense. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you heard, like, it's as though it got noisier and noisier and noisier until this moment where it sort of dropped, right? Everything was rhyming and like the really intricate words and sounds. It was as though, things were just getting a bit crazier and crazier and crazier until, things were brought down low. Yeah, it was gorgeous. Which is exactly the point of the poem, right? It's not just a fun thing, look at what he did with sounds. That's the point of the poem, right? That the way that we use words and sounds is important, and we can use it so very often in very hurtful, very poor ways where they're damaging, and yet we're called to use them in such a way where, and I love this, he plays on the idea of Christ as the Word, right? This is the proper way that words should be used, right? He's the one that gives words their meaning, their sense, right? Gorgeous poem, right? Okay. Oh, so he's alive now, thankfully. Yeah. No. Yeah. He's alive now, and so if you're ever interested in hearing some really good talks about the Inklings, so C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Charles William, and Owen Barfield, and I guess a few others, he's the guy to listen to. Yeah, amazing stuff. But we can talk the love of Malcolm Guite later. Okay, cool. All right, so I don't want to go on for too much longer. I'm going to leave the rest of Edward Hirsch's essay. If you're interested, by all means, enjoy it. And I've picked out a few poems that I think are probably worth picking up on as you read through. So those are my insertions. That isn't in the original thing. And at one of the pages, I've got a few points, a bit of a summary as to how to read poems that I at least find helpful. You may find them useless, in which case don't worry about them. Maybe the last thing to finish on, unless we have questions about it, all right, how about we do this? So, how many people have heard of Scott Cairns? Okay, shame on the rest of you. Wonderful Orthodox poet. How many of you have heard of Ancient Faith Radio? Yeah, okay, so more, not heaps more, but okay, more. Okay, so on Ancient Faith Radio, you've got a few podcasts. So this American poet, Scott Cairns, started a podcast, and it was all about poetry and introducing us to Orthodox poets. Okay, and on the first podcast, what he goes through is just a bit of a sense of what he thinks poems are and what they do. And so it's worthwhile just going through that because I think it touches on some of the questions and ideas that we were touching on a bit earlier. So he goes, welcome to the first edition of a regular podcast having to do with poetry. Flesh becomes word. Nice inversion of the word becomes flesh sort of a thing. Okay, the good people of Ancient Faith Radio have asked me to offer up periodically some readings from my poems. I think I'm thinking to include as well some poems in progress. That is to say, some unpublished poems. My hope is also to introduce at the conclusion of each episode a new poet to the listeners, which he does, really sort of enjoyable poets and poems that he goes through. The Orthodox Church in the States and throughout the world has no shortage of practicing and very accomplished poets. One of them is here today, and I'd like very much to introduce some of these to you. The other thing I'd like to include is a sampling from the longer tradition, the larger tradition, the deeper tradition of Orthodox poetic language. And in many of the cases, some of what I'll be reading are translations of saints who actually compose their works in verse. So, I'll ask a stupid question. Which saint is responsible for the Gregorian liturgy? Saint Gregory? Yes. I mean, which one though? No, I like the play. Which Gregory? We've got 27 of them. Saint Gregory, the theologian, right? Within the Coptic Church, there's two people who have that title, the theologian. We've only got two. The Eastern Orthodox have gone completely out of hand, and they've got three, right? They've just got one extra. It's the same two. So one of ours, him, St. John, the one who wrote the fourth gospel, right? So St. John the theologian and St. Gregory the theologian. Both of them, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the Gospel of John, very poetic language, like the way that he writes. And St. Gregory the theologian was known for his poetry, right? When he came to write a list of all the poems of all the books that should be in the Old Testament and New Testament, he wrote it as a poem. When he was talking about his own sort of struggles with depression, he was actually writing that in poem form. There were so many things that he would teach in poems. He's known for his poetry. And these are the two saints that we have the title, the theologian for. Something very deeply linked, at least in our church, between poetry and theology. So that's sort of what he's getting at. And here I'm talking most notably of Saint Simeon, the new theologian, who in the Eastern Orthodox Church is the third guy who's got the title, the theologian. And of course, Saint Ephrem of Syria. We're big fans of Saint Ephrem of Syria. Again, heaps of poetry. And Saint Gregory Nazianzen, the other term for Saint Gregory the theologian. So that's him, who composed in verse. But that is not the entirety of what I understand to be the poetic production of orthodoxy. And just if you're interested, Scott Cairns has this book, I forget the name of it, I'll get the name for you. It's filled with particular passages from the saints, both male and female, like ancient and recent, where he's sort of written them in verse. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous work. Okay, so many of the saints' writings, while they were composed in prose, which is to say not verse, were nonetheless poetic. In recent years, I actually have taken to shoving some of these works into translation and into verse in hopes of foregrounding, I would say, the poetic quality itself of these writings. So that's what I was talking about there. And when I say that, I suppose I want to draw our attention to the way in which poetic language operates a little differently than what we're used to. That is to say, in most cases, language is understood to be a representation of something else. We speak in order to refer to an idea, to communicate an idea. Poetic language does that, certainly, but poetic language does something else as well, and that is the heart of the matter here, as I understand it. When language draws attention to itself as such as language. When we find a sort of chewy, sinewy difficulty in the language before us, when it attains something of an opacity as opposed to a transparency. So he's saying, when you're reading something, and instead of the words acting as pointers to an idea, to some sort of information, where they don't sort of stand and say, I'm a word, pay attention to the word, but pay attention to the idea, and they're sort of like ushering you along to the idea, which is what a good scientific textbook should do, right? Like, I don't want to have to pay attention to these particular words because maybe there are many different ways of saying the same thing, right? The important thing is the idea. Whereas for poetry, the word matters, the choice of word matters, the way that it's used matters, the feel of the word matters, right? So that is to say, in most cases, when we see the words, so when we stop and sort of pay attention to the words, not just as pointers, we are obliged to collaborate with those words in a slightly different way than normal, with normal words or a normal use of words. And so the poetic, as I understand it, occurs when language insists that the reader, the listener, collaborate in the meaning making. This is one of the reasons why I think the scriptures are understood to be inexhaustible in what they have to say to us. This is touching on what we were saying before about, do the scriptures have this poetic sense? I would say yes, and Scott would say yes, definitely. We all know from our own experience, for instance, that one might read a passage in the scriptures one day and discover some necessary truth in that visit. And then weeks later or days later, moments later, we might look at it again. And even in that second glance, find yet something else. The text opens up in another way, and in so doing, opens us up in another way. And this is what I understand to be the poetic operation of language. Does that idea make sense? Okay, cool. Now, so wrapping up here, that last line is kind of what I wanted to touch on a bit. The idea of the text opening up in a certain way, but then when the text opens up in a certain way, we open up in a different way, right? Like our reception of the text and the opportunity to make meaning with this text is in itself a little miracle that's happening, where it's not just reading for information and then storing information in our pockets as though we were sort of separated from the information, ready to use it whenever we need it, right? Like the thing that poetry demands is a certain effort, a certain honesty, a certain raw intensity that doesn't just require us to read in a certain way, but it requires us to understand in a certain way. And it has the ability to sort of change us in the reading, which is exactly the sort of thing that Scripture should be doing for us when we're reading, which is why we make such a big point of we're not just reading for the sake of information, right? That's one way to read, but it's not a very engaging way to read. So often the church fathers are making a point saying, put yourself in this passage, right? Understand how it relates to you. And one of the best ways of doing that is to have a bit of a poetic sense when you're reading, right? To see how, your life and the passage collide, both make meaning together. All right. It's probably good to end with a poem. Would you like to end with a poem by St. Gregory the theologian? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah? All right. 10. Oh, yeah, put it on the screen. Yep. Now, if you get a chance to take these home or just take photos of them, there are a few other poems, some of my favorite poems that I think are really worthwhile reading. And I've tried to put as many by different authors as possible. So just take the names of the authors and go and see their stuff. I guarantee at least one of you will enjoy it. Okay, so this is a series of 2 prayers by St. Gregory, both very short, 1, 2. One's a morning prayer, one's an evening prayer. And as far as I can tell, they're not set to be linked. Like the translation from one, I found in one book, the translation of another, I found in another book, and both from seemingly different sources, but I think they work really nicely together, so I've just put them together. So St. Gregory, saint, poet, theologian. Okay. I rise and pledge myself to God to do no deed at all of dark. This day shall be his sacrifice, and I unmoved my passion's Lord. I blush to be so old and foul, and yet to stand before his table. You know what I would do, O Christ, O then to do it, make me able. Yeah, it's gorgeous, right? Yeah. Now this is an English translation of what was presumably written in the Greek. But right, that sense of as soon as he gets up, this is his morning prayer to God, right? He's pledging himself. And I love this. I should have also written saint, bishop, poet, theologian, right? Because that's the sense of what he's doing. He's saying, when I stand before your table, right? When I officiate at a mass, a liturgy, I have this sense of I shouldn't, there's something wrong here, right? I blush to be so old and foul and yet to stand before his table. Okay, so that's the morning prayer. Evening prayer. Word of God and truth itself, I consecrated this day to you, but I have played you false. Night now falls upon me and finds my own lamp barely bright. This I prayed over and foresaw, but even so my feet still stumbled, and so darkness fell around me, that hater of salvation. O my Christ, rekindle my little lamp and shine on me once more. Like this very repentant end of the day, whereas a very hopeful beginning of the day. And I love that. Like he says in the beginning, I'm old and foul, but you know what I would do. You know the heart that desires to do the good that you have set before me. Help me to do it. And when he falls short, he goes, this I prayed over and I foresaw it. I saw it coming. Like I wasn't sort of surprised, oh my God, I sinned. It was, no, like we know I'm probably going to sin. And so at the end of the day, he's like, no, I knew it. I foresaw it. And I pledged the day to you, and that's why I'm saying I've played you false. I pledged something I wasn't able to deliver perfectly, right? But even then, he's not sort of like just lifeless with depression. He's saying, rekindle my little lamp. I love that. Rekindle my little lamp and shine on me once more. Christ obviously being the one who shines the big lamp, right? Like, rekindle the little lamp. I love that. All right. So I'll end it there. If there are any questions or thoughts, by all means, shoot them. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. No? Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John. That was beautiful. I think we should call him John, the man, passion behind the poetry. What do you think? Maybe you can start your own podcast one day. That was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so glad to see everyone here tonight. It's fantastic. We have some awesome news. So our camp registrations have opened up. We've had a flood of registrations, but the good news is we've still got about 20 more spots to go. So we're at about 82, maybe about, 16 spots to go. I should be realistic. We're at about 82 registrations. We're hoping, fingers crossed, we get to about 100, which is more or less the capacity. And I'm sure everyone's really excited to kind of get together and be re-enthused, I guess, with a camp. We all know how fun they are, especially when we gather and we spend quality time with each other. I think that's what binds us together as a community. So if you haven't registered, make sure you register. Can I get a show of hands in this room who is coming to camp nice and high? Awesome. Pretty much everyone here. Fantastic. Okay. I don't think there's food in the van today. I'm not sure what it is. Monica, if you know. No? Okay, it's like a mystery surprise. Just walk up there and you'll find out. And I'm not sure what's happening next week, but check your emails or text messages or his Vine. There'll be an update there. It's 2 nights, 3 days. It's at Deer Park. It's a pretty good location. I've never been to Deer Park before, but I've heard some fantastic things about it. Alrighty, I'll hand it over to Rose, and then Abuna, when you're ready, you can come and close for our prayer.
All right, guys, do you all know this one? Let's stand up and pray together. Just quickly before we start, put your hands up if you do know this one. It's a bit old. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We're good. We're good to go. Okay. There's a spare one.
I place my soul into your hands, my Lord Jesus Christ. Lead me, 'cause I depend on you. Lead me and I'll serve you. Please be my guide in every way. Be my God, I won't go astray. Sanctify my heart and my deeds until I see you, Lord. as you have always said, a source of all goodness, as you have always said, a source of all goodness. Come unto me, all you weary, come unto me, and you'll find rest. Come unto me, I am the way, I am the truth and life. When my life gets filled with worries,